Welcome to my channel. This is Uncle Jay Got to Say, and I'm Uncle Jay, a platform where I give common sense advice on different subject matters that impact my world or things I want to talk about, things I find interesting, and sometimes I give commentary. Today I'm going to do both commentary and advice. And the subject I want to talk about is that in a couple of weeks, schools in my area will be back in session. Kids will be going back to school, and buses will be back on the roads. I don't have a problem with the buses. I do have a problem with the fact that I'm usually out and about in the afternoons and I get the opportunity to see something called front door service, where buses stop at every house to drop off a child. They'll stop, drive a few feet, stop again, drive a few feet, stop again, stop again, stop again. It's a bit much. You're holding up traffic, you're building up gridlock, you're having people late to get into their jobs, you're stopping parents trying to go pick up their kids from school who don't ride the bus, and you're just stopping people having their day and trying to do what they need to do. Now, I don't have a problem with the buses trying to get the kids home safely. That's part of their job. But, back in my day, we had something called a bus stop. And that's where we were picked up in the mornings and that's where we were dropped off in the afternoons. Now, I noticed that these school buses will not go into apartment complexes or mobile home parks, or they won't go into townhome divisions. They won't do that. And maybe because the streets are too narrow, maybe there are too many speed bumps, they won't do that. They'll stop right at the front and they would drop the kids off, and about 20, 30 kids would get out and they will actually disperse and go to their units where they live. But if it's a subdivision, if it's a main road, if it's a side road, if it's a commercial area, it doesn't matter. They stop these buses and put kids out and hold up traffic. It is absolutely crazy. It's absolutely crazy. If you stop at one spot, all kids get out and live on that side of the road, who live in that subdivision, who live on that street. If they got out and they walk to their homes, you save so much time. Simple as that. Now, I remember that when I was younger, we had buses too. And I got a bus, I think around second grade. Yeah, into second grade. We got our school buses. So prior to that, as a kindergartner in the first grade, we walked to school, we walked home. Okay. Now, I did measure the distance between my house I grew up in and the first elementary school I went to, and it was 0.8 miles. And now we didn't walk the street version. We actually walked through alleyways and through the woods and over the creek and things like that to get to school. But that's what you did back then. But we did still have to walk to school and walk home. Now, in the second grade, we actually got a bus. And I remember they probably sent some kind of notification home telling parents that if you live in a certain area, then your child can ride the bus. Okay. And I remember the day it happened, had to be spring because it was warm outside. And we got out of school, and I was taught to meet my sister, who was in the third grade, at a designated spot outside of that school, being in that spot every day. And so that's where I went, that designated spot. Me and a couple others were sitting out there waiting for our siblings to come, and they never came. So finally, a teacher poked their head out the door and said, "Hey, don't you live in so and so place? You need to take the bus inside the building." So we go run around to the side of the building, no buses. So we wait, we wait, we wait. And then finally, another teacher comes out and say, "You all waiting for the bus?" And we say, "Yeah." "Well, the bus is already gone. You need to run on home." So we do that. We run home. And we get home. And when I got home, my mother said to me, "Why don't you take the bus?" I said, "I was told to meet my sister at a designated spot outside the school, and that's what I did." And she said, "Okay, that's fine. But starting tomorrow, you're going to meet your sister on the side of the school in front of the buses, and then take the bus and go home." So then I started riding the bus. I did ride a bus for age of second grade and third grade. Then after third grade, we moved to the other side of town where my mother worked. And I stopped riding the bus because we were not in the bus zone anymore. And so I had to walk to school and walk home. Sometimes I got a ride from my mom, but she worked nearby. But if not, we had to walk to school. We definitely had to walk home. I measured distance from my second house I lived in to the second elementary school I went to, and that was 1.1 miles. To my junior high school from that house was zero point 0.7 miles, and from that house to my high school was 1.4 miles. Now, my mother taught at the high school, so when I got to high school, I can get a ride with her most times. But if I got up too late or she had to be at work earlier, I had to walk to school and then I had to walk home. And that's what happened. So walking was a normal thing in my generation, and you got used to walking. And we did not walk in walking shoes. It didn't exist. You wore tennis shoes, rubber sole shoes that you did everything in. Now, unless you played golf, you may have golf shoes. If you played football, you had cleats on your shoes. But other than that, you wore a tennis shoe. It was flat, it was rubber sole, And no matter what the brand were, they were shoes, and that's what you wore. Now back to my story here. Um, Basically, I don't have a problem with the buses. I just wish they would enjoy getting a bus stop. We had a bus stop when I was a kid. The bus stop was, I think, 2.5 miles from my house, and we'd have to walk from my house to the bus stop, wait for the bus take us to school, and then in the afternoons, the bus would take us from the school back to the bus stop. We walk home, and we just did that. It was easier, and you got home. You were latchkey kids, means you had a key to get into the house. You knew what you're supposed to do, what you're not supposed to do, and if you didn't do what you're supposed to do, there were repercussions for that. So that's a story for another time. But back to my story here, and for my advice I give is that I don't like the buses stopping door to door. I wish they would change that. You know, it is more than just safety for the kids, it's calamity and chaos for the drivers to have to be waiting and waiting and waiting. But when I do have to drive in the afternoons, what I try to do is avoid those areas. I use map services to determine where the chaos is. And if I know where a street is and I know where a school is on the street, I try to desperately avoid going there. Because if you have to drive by a school between the hours of 2 and 4 and 5 o'clock in the afternoon, there are school zones. And oftentimes your speed limit has to change under 25 miles anyway. There are oftentimes cross guards out there, the police officers out there trying to maintain traffic. There are tons of parents going to pick up their kids from school, and that's a whole, that's a lot. There's a lot to see. The parade, I do mean parade of cars, vehicles, trucks, SUVs. They had to pick up one or two children in unison. It's crazy, but they do it. I'm glad I'm not a parent these days. I have to deal with that. But when I do have to deal with the driving at that time, I simply avoid it. I try to drive around it, go around it, avoid those streets, avoid those schools if I have to, if I can, take side roads, what I have to do to avoid driving through that chaos because it is chaotic. But if I have to drive through it, cannot avoid it, I try to keep my patience. I try to turn on my music or, do what I need to do in the car just to keep my patience. I know what's going to happen. I know the buses are going to stop. I know the kids are going to be walking to and fro. I know that the parents are going to be out there. They're going to be waiting and non-waiting, things like that. So I just really try to keep my cool about it and just try to keep my composure and know that it's going to end and I'm going to go on with my day. Well, that's all I have to say today. That's all I want to talk about. I know school's going back into session, and I know that the buses will be out there. I wish they would get bus stops and make it so much easier, but until they do, I just have to be patient. That's all Uncle Jake had to say today, and I thank you.